Again, with that public comment, I hope by the time we finish with this presentation, it'll clarify some of the concerns that were addressed or brought up during that time. Next slide, please. Okay, I always like to go back and revisit how we have arrived where we are. It's always a good reminder, even for those of us who deal with it on a constant basis. So again, we go back to July 13th of this year, and due to the community spread in Stanislaus County, schools were closed to in-person learning, and we were required to all go to distance learning. So we've been in this mode since July 13th. The Sylvan Select Distance Learning Model was developed and implemented. And then the governor provided the option for districts that reside in a county in the purple tier risk level to file a TK waiver for in-person learning. And about that same time, the California Department of Public Health provided additional guidance allowing for in-person instruction for small group cohorts for specific groups of students. Next slide, please. And continue with that timeline. So Sylvan filed a TK waiver on September 30th, and the waiver was approved the following week. Also, small group cohort in-person learning for special education classrooms began on October 1st. And our reopening plan was presented to the governing board on October 6th. And at that time, we began the work of reopening to in-person learning for grades TK through 3. And I'll address all these timelines and specifics for 4-8 as we go through the presentation. But again, I just wanted to take a quick walk back so people realize the sequence that we've been following. Okay, next slide. Okay, this was the recommendation that we provided to the board at our reopening meeting back on the 6th. And again, at that time, we looked at November 2nd was going to be our timeline to bring back our traditional K, our kindergarten, and our first grade. And our goal at that time was, which is pretty unique for our community, and I'll talk more about that. And again, when people are comparing the work that our district has done compared to what other districts are doing, I think you'll have a better understanding of maybe why we look a little different. Number one, we were committed to our TK3 students to be able to get them back to as much of a normal schedule as possible. And we did start that on November 2nd. The next timeline that we proposed was November 17th, and that was to bring back our second and third graders to the same type of schedule. And again, that's today. We've met that timeline. And I'll be giving you numbers and updates of those programs as we go through the presentation. Now, the November 30th timeline, again, this is where some of that confusion comes in. When we presented this at our reopening meeting, we knew that there were going to be additional challenges when bringing back grades 4 through 8. One, because of scheduling. Two, because of the number of students in those classes compared to our primary students. And so we purposely gave 3 bullets about our goals of moving forward. So the November 30th date that people were referring to, that was our intent to bring back 4th through 8th grade students in small cohort groups. And I will talk about, again, later in the presentation, we have already started doing that for at least 4th and 5th. And we're looking on the 30th of implementing that for grades 6 through 8 for students in small cohort groups. Our next goal was to develop a hybrid model where we could be bringing students back like a lot of the other districts are doing. Many districts, rather than choosing to bring all of their TK3 back 5 days a week, they just did a broad brush stroke of making it a hybrid model for grades TK through 6, so that you were working with half of your student population. And again, that was the philosophy of those districts. And again, our goal, you know, if things improve, is to bring back those students 5 days a week as well, full time. Okay, and I just wanted to reiterate again in that comparison with other districts, our Sylvan commitments to reopening. We've been very committed to providing quality programs from the very beginning when we've dealt with this crisis. When we had to shift to distance learning, we wanted to create a distance learning model that was one viable and sustainable choice for parents. And I think as you look at some of the percentages of people choosing and some of the comments from our task force, and I'll be sharing that with you, we have developed a very robust distance learning program. And I'm so proud of our teachers as they've been expanding their skill sets in working in a totally new environment for many of them. And so again, we just didn't want to put together some quick program just to meet the needs of, of the demands we were facing. We wanted to make it a program that we were proud of and that we could in the future look sustaining, and that we have met that objective and are continuing to meet that. We want to provide a quality small group cohort for students in need of additional support beyond the distance learning. We were committed to providing a quality program there. And at this stage, we're providing numerous special education classrooms, providing valuable in-person learning and support services. And again, we've been doing that since October 1st, and we're continuing to expand that. And we will continue to look at ways to even bring in more cohorts of students when possible that are not successfully accessing distance learning. And then we also were committed to providing a quality TK3 in-person learning program and distance learning program. And you notice I include both of those models at the same time. I did not want our district's commitment, we did not want our distance learning program to be a Band-Aid. We wanted it to be a viable option for our parents. And I'm finding, as I'll share out from our task force, our teachers are very committed to ensuring that our students that are on distance learning maintain a quality program, not just shift the focus to in-person learning at this point. We provide a dual pathway of learning for our families. Our parents are provided a choice of either an in-person or distance learning model. And again, you'll look at the numbers with our TK3 when you look at close to 60% are in-person and 40% are distance learning. And then to the extent possible, provide the same quality opportunities for students in grades 4 through 8. And as I mentioned before, it's much more challenging. One, because of the class sizes. And how do we maintain, with our current staffing, ways to provide a distance learning teacher and a teacher for in-person learning. I just wanted to share, again, as far as the implementation with those small cohort groups, these are the groups that we've been bringing back. And again, we've been committed to safety. We have tried to take an approach of a phased-in approach with things. And that's what you'll see with our plan. We've been meeting our timelines regarding that. And these are the groups that are coming back, just for information. And then I'll talk about the November 30th group later in the presentation. Okay, this is an update on our TK kindergarten grades 1, 2, and 3. Our TK and grade 1 started on November 2nd, and grades 2 and 3 started today on the 17th. Our current enrollment for those grades is 3,218 students. In-person learning, we have 62%, and 995 are TK through 1, and 1,004 for grades 2 and 3 as of today's enrollment. And there's our distance learning at 38% with 610 and 209. Very interesting with those grade spans, how they're very close to the same numbers, choosing the distance learning or in-person learning. I think some notable considerations when we look at that, and I've talked a little bit about this before, but I just want to emphasize it because I'm very proud of the work that our staff has been doing and what we are providing in a program. We're providing both in-person and distance learning 5 days a week from 8:30 to 2:15. except for on the modified early release days on Wednesdays. We limited in-person learning class sizes to 20 students or less. In an effort to honor parent requests regarding selected learning models, many students were reassigned to new teachers. So I'm just trying to give in some of the impacts and what, just an update. And then it required additional personnel to accommodate maintaining social distancing for in-person learning. So it reflects our commitment. And we had our one-time COVID funds that was provided to us, and we have made those decisions to use some of those funds to be able to staff this to meet that commitment. But it has taken a great deal of work and coordination to make this happen. And that's why you go back to what your commitment is, and do your actions reflect your commitments. And I think that's very important for us to remember. And I'm proud of the work we've done with that. And then after 2 weeks of in-person learning and providing childcare, again, we're also providing childcare, which is close to 80 children for staff so that they can be able to be there at work. And we've not had to close any of those programs in the 2 weeks due to any kind of COVID cases. Again, if I had some wood, I'd knock on it, but I only have plastic. Again, that's just a metric as far as those in-person learning. Okay, update on 4-8. Again, when we worked with our TK through 3 plan, again, we didn't form a large task force. I feel like we had a vision. I felt like we had to do a lot of work with that. And before we ever presented any kind of information to parents, we made sure we had a model in line so that they could make an informed response. That was very important to us. And I felt like we did all of the work with that. Of course, there were logistics we had to figure out along the way with anything like that. But with the 4-8 model, we felt the need to form a task force. It is much more challenging than to bring back TK3. 1, because of the large numbers. 2, we wanted to be able to run this program with our existing staff. It's not even that we don't have enough COVID funds to support an increase there. It's really more about the workforce and the availability of hiring staff to fill these positions right now. That we're at a real critical phase all throughout the state of California, finding, because so many staff, that may be taking leaves or aren't able to be at work. And so trying to hire staff is challenging. So that's one of our concerns with that. So we formed a task force, and it's comprised of site level and district level staff to include our certificated and classified representatives from each grade and from each of our school sites. So far, the task force has met 3 times, and they provided input regarding which groups of students would be a priority to bring back under the small group cohort guidance. We wanted to hear from our staff. What are you seeing on distance learning? What are you hearing? Which students are you seeing that could really benefit the most from coming back to the cohort guidance? And priority given to students, groups experiencing the greatest difficulty in assessing student learning or distance learning. We've examined various in-person and distance learning models, and to create a model that best aligns with grades 4 through 5, grade 6, and grades 7 and 8. As we've got into that, we realized you really have to break it down by those 3 different components, because they're each so different with different dynamics. So the key input we received from our 4-8 reopening task force so far, their feedback was that students in special day class programs should be a priority in being served in small cohort groups. So they validated the thoughts that we had as well about which groups we should bring back. And that will be reflected when I show you the timeline. The support for the current Sylvan Learn and Select distance learning model has resulted in positive outcomes for staff and students. Staff prefers that 4-8 in-person learning models do not have in-person learning models do not have a negative impact on our distance learning program. And I think that showed the commitment being voiced by our staff. They find that program valuable, and they want to ensure that those students that choose, or parents that choose to be on a distance learning model, are not impacted negatively. The most desirable 4-8 models would assign a specific teacher to either in-person learning or to Stillman Select. And again, we've felt that commitment as our teachers in our TK3 model have been able to do that. They've been able to focus on one delivery model. The challenge for 4-8 is how do we do that without increasing staffing? And that's where our brainstorming and our work together, we have to keep working through that. And are interested in obtaining parent input regarding which model they would prefer, in-person or distance learning. But understand that prior to surveying parents, more details must be provided regarding each model so that parents can make an informed response. You know, it would have been easy for us several weeks ago to send out a survey to say, do you want your child to come back in person, or do you want them to stay on distance learning? Well, I think a parent would have a hard time saying, well, what am I giving you feedback regarding? What is your in-person learning program going to look like? Will your distance learning program remain the same? And again, you know, you want to gather data that's usable. So we will be surveying our parents, and we will word it in a way and provide information where parents can make an informed response to us. All right, let me show you the timeline based upon that feedback. Okay, so the November 30th date that people are talking about, and aligns with the reopening plan we talked about before. We are planning to bring back our small cohort groups for our special day class students. And we're still, again, some of those classes, they actually have students that are mainstreamed into elective programs. So it's not as easy as it is for our TK through 5 kids that we did it. So we're still working through those dynamics. On December 3rd, we're going to have another reopening task force meeting. We'll be, again, looking at possible models, talking about the commitments that I mentioned tonight. And the work between December 4th and the 18th, the grades 4 through 6 schedule. Our goal is to have that finalized and send out a parent survey. Now, that won't be a survey asking parents to make a choice. What we need to do is give them some information about what kind of model are we looking at, and then have them give some feedback about what they want to do, or questions. We'll have to work on our survey. Then what we will do, based upon that, we'll wrap it up as far as, based on that parent input, we can go back to our schedules and fine tune our schedules. And then we have 3 weeks off during the holidays. And originally we had set the date for return to be January 11th. As we looked at the amount of work that goes into this, especially trying to build these schedules and getting parent input, we felt we needed the 19th, the week of the 19th, the week of the 11th, to notify parents about the program and give them more information about assigning classes. So that gives us a week to make sure we get that all lined out. And our plan would to be reopened in person for grades 4 through 6, and our continued Sylvan Select for 4-6 on the 19th. Now, the Martin Luther King holiday is on the 18th. So that would be a 4-day week. Now, people are asking about grades 7 and 8. One, that schedule is extremely complicated. And at this stage, remember, we're bringing our students back based upon the waiver. It's a TK through 6 waiver. Now with the counties moving into purple, you're not able to bring back 7th and 8th grade to in-person learning. So our timeline would be to return our students back once the county has been in the red tier. And I need to get further clarification, but I believe you have to be in the red tier for 2 consecutive weeks before you can bring students back. So again, when you're in red, you can bring students back TK through 12. And so again, our timeline for that's why I put to be determined. We'll continue to work on the schedule, seek input from parents. But looking at the current situation we're in, the likelihood of the district, our county, going into red anytime soon, again, I don't know, but we'll base our decision upon that timeline. And that's my presentation. Again, I'm as eager as anybody to get these students back in school. It's very hard. I see parents pull up as I'm in front of the school, dropping off their TK through 3rd graders, and I see students that look like 4th or 5th grade sitting in the front seat, or they're walking with their parents to the school, and I see them wanting to get back into their schools. I totally empathize with the families and the parents. But again, we want to make sure we bring them back into a program that works for them. We also feel, again, when we made our decision about our TK3, that vulnerable group of kids at that foundational age of them needing direct instruction in person, we did see that as a priority. And we do believe that grades 4 through 8, even though some struggle with distance learning, they have more of, I feel like, potential to be successful than our primary students were on distance learning for some. But anyway, that's our update. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Fredrickson.